Realm of the Ring Lords, Part 2. Historically, the ring was a symbol of perpetually divine justice, which was measured by the rod. In ancient depictions, the Sumerian goddess Lilith and the Babylonian god Marduk are individually portrayed holding the rod and ring devices. These are in keeping with other portrayals of Mesopotamian kings and queens as, for example, on the stelae of Shamash, Handur-Namu from the 3rd millennium BC. In some instances, the rod is clearly marked in calculable units, like a modern ruler. And in Babylonia, it was referred to as the rule. The one who held the rule was the designated ruler, which is from where the governmental term derives. From around 4000 BC, the ring was a primary device of the Anunnaki gods, who were recorded as having descended into ancient Sumer and were responsible for the establishment of municipal government and kingly practice. In view of this, it is of particular relevance that, when Professor Tolkien was asked about the Middle-earth environment of The Lord of the Rings, he said that he perceived its setting to relate to about 4000 BC. The pot of soup, the cauldron of the story, has always been boiling, he said, and to it have continually been added new bits. In this respect, the root of Tolkien's popular tale was, in accordance with his Anglo-Saxon scholarship, extracted directly from Saxon folklore and was not actually new in concept. Indeed, the early Saxon god Wotan, Odin, the equivalent of the Sumerian god Anu, was said to have ruled the 9 worlds of the rings, having the 9th ring, the One Ring, to govern the 8 others. The contested ownership of the One Ring, as related in The Lord of the Rings, is little different to the enduring quest for the Holy Grail. They are both quests for the maintenance of sovereignty. But, in both fact and fiction, the ring and the Grail are each seen to be misappropriated by those who perceive them as weapons of power. Hence, it has been imperative, in the respective stories, that access to the Grail is protected by difficult questions, just as it was essential to keep the One Ring from the evil Sauron of Mordor. As the generations passed from ancient Mesopotamian and Egyptian times, the ideal of dynastic kingship spread through the Mediterranean lands into the Balkans, the Black Sea regions, and Europe. But, in the course of this, the crucial essence of the old wisdom was lost, and this gave rise to dynasties that were not of the original kingly race. Instead, many were unrelated warrior chiefs who gained their thrones by might of the sword. The sacred culture of the ancients was, nevertheless, retained in the messianic line of King David of Judah, circa 1008 BC, whose significance, as detailed in Genesis of the Grail Kings, was in his pharaonic heritage, not in his generally portrayed descent from Abraham and the Shemites' train. It was because of this particular inheritance that David's son, Solomon the Wise, was enabled to create his Egyptian-style temple project in Jerusalem. This led to a Holy Land revival of the pharaonic and one-time Mesopotamian Rosicrucius movement at a time when Egypt was beset by foreign influences, first from Libya, Nubia, and Kush, and then from further afield. Resultantly, the traditional marriage arrangements of the pharaohs and princesses gave way to diplomatic alliances. Marduk with the rod rule and ring of divine justice. At his feet is the Mias from a stone relief of Ahura Mazda, associated with the Sumerian Enki. In 525 BCE, Egypt was conquered by the Persians, whose kings were subsequently ousted by Alexander the Great of Macedonia's army in 332 BC. This led to the Greek dynasty of the Ptolemies and the well-known Queen Cleopatra VII. Her liaison with the Roman general Mark Antony caused the final downfall of the pharaohs, and Egypt was subjugated by imperial Rome shortly before the time of Jesus. At length, as the Roman Empire collapsed, Egypt fell to Byzantine governors and then, after 641, to the sway of Islam. By that time, the Grail dynasty from David and Solomon had progressed into the west, notably to the Merovingian kings of the Franks, while related branches established kingdoms in Ireland and Gaelic Britain. These lines were linked through marriage to the parallel strains from the Old Testament characters Ham, Japhet, and Tubal-Cain, which had survived as the royal houses of Scythia and Anatolia. and the families had forged their own marital links with the early princesses of the Egyptian succession. The first Pendragon, head dragon, of the Britannic Isle, Pendraco insularis, from this stock was King Cymbeline of the House of Camelot, Camelot, meaning curved light, whence Camelot, who was installed in about AD 10. The British Pendragons were not father-to-son successors in a particular descent, but were individually elected from reigning family branches by a druidic council of elders to be the overall kings of kings. See Appendix I. The last Pendragon was the Welsh king Cadwaladr of Gwynedd, who died in 664. At around that time, much of Britain fell to the Germanic influence of the invading Angles and Saxons. Hence, Angleland, England, was born, as distinct from Scotland and Wales. This coincided with Byzantium's loss of Egypt to the caliphs, and, following the last Roman emperor in AD 476, a whole new governmental structure had evolved in the West. Eventually, its ultimate overlords were the popes, and outside the preserved Gaelic domains they appointed kings, not by any right of heritage, but to suit the political motives of the bishops and the fast-growing Roman Church. In view of this, the staunch upholders of the Church's articles of dogma openly opposed the pre-papal concept of Grail kingship. These bishops pronounced the Arthurian romances heretical and blacklisted the prophecies of Merlin in 1547 at the Council of Trento in northern Italy. Everything that was magic to the ears and all that was fresh air to the subjugated became denounced as sinister and occult. The Great Enlightenment of the Grail Code of Service was condemned in a series of brutal inquisitions from 1203, and anything remotely connected with the female ethic was dubbed witchcraft. In this latter regard, the Church became so fanatical in its opposition to the ring culture that, in 1431, when Joan of Arc was sentenced to burning at the stake for her alleged sorcery, one of the main charges leveled against her was that she had used magical rings for curative purposes. The Sacred Hallows. In all the Grail romances and in the Tales of the Ring, the message is relentlessly clear. In the wrong hands, both the ring and the Grail can bring disaster. The power of the ring has to be withstood, otherwise it will enslave its master, whereas the Grail will retaliate with a vengeance if misused. Either way, the moral is the same in that, ultimately, power is self-destructive when achieved through selling one's soul. Consequently, the ring can be a halo or a crown, but it can equally become a noose. From the 1930s, Adolf Hitler's fanatical obsession with finding the Hallows of Grail Castle was a prime example of this misconceived notion of power. In his search for the Hallows, the Führer of Germany obtained an ancient lance, said to have been used by Charlemagne, which he insisted was the spear of Longinus the centurion, the spear which pierced the side of Jesus at the crucifixion. This, he reckoned, was the sacred spear of destiny, so revered in Grail lore. With this in his possession, Hitler was confident that his empire, Reich, would be as strong as that of Charlemagne. But legend had it that, after many great victories, Charlemagne was doomed to defeat from the moment he lost the magical weapon. In Richard Wagner's opera, Parsifal, this powerful imagery is conveyed when the old knight clings or promptly disappears from the mortal plane on hurling the hallowed spear at Parsifal. And so it was that on the 30th of April 1945, the very day when the American 7th Army, under General Patton, seized the lance from Nuremberg Castle, Adolf Hitler, in the grip of such forceful and consuming lore, accepted defeat and shot himself. Today, the lance resides in the Hofburg Museum, Vienna. In the 13th century Grail romance, Parzival, by the Bavarian knight Wolfram von Eschenbach, the questing Parzival first sees the mysterious spear, dripping blood from its point, at a ceremony in Grail Castle. The sight of it causes much consternation among the knights, who explain that it represents the forces which kill the higher spirit in man. Also, its appearance, when carried, signifies that the Grail quest has not yet been